The battle has been engaged and has been set forth by Dr. Melendez is fought not only on the intellectual level where we find and do the research and find the facts and to know what the problem is, but it is also fought with action. And that action comes from groups like many of you that represent here, but one of those groups that's with us today has been a supporter of this event and other events that we've done in Central Florida. It is Hispanic Federation, one of the largest, if not the largest, advocacy groups for the Hispanics in the United States. And with us today is Jose Davila, who's Vice President for Policy and Government Relations for the Hispanic Federations. And since 2012, he has coordinated the Federation's policy, advocacy, government relations, and civic engagement efforts nationally and in several states, including New York, Connecticut, and Florida. He also serves on the board of New York City School Support Services, a nonprofit organization charged with administering the custodial system for the city's 1,700 public schools. Previously, he worked at the New York City Public Advocate's Office, the New York Immigration Coalition, the Fiscal Policy Institute, Bronx Works, and NYPRG. Jose is a Bronx native of Puerto Rico descent. Vamos a darle a warm flower of applause to Jose Davila.
Thank you, Tony, and to my distinguished panelists. Really great to be here with you all. It's really impressive to see so many people come from across the state, all the way to the Capitol, to learn about issues that are important to our community, to have a dialogue, and really to ideally educate and influence our leaders in Tallahassee to continue to help us in addressing both the crisis back on the island as well as what it means for our communities across the state. So the Hispanic Federation is a proud partner of Puerto Rico Day in Tallahassee. I know many of you were there last night for the reception. Thank you for being there. It was a great honor to honor those amazing honorees and also to celebrate with you all. So thank you very much for your time. What I'm going to talk about is what is Hispanic Federations and really the diaspora's role throughout the United States in really helping Puerto Rico and really how Florida and Boricuas here can play a major role in helping the island and helping our communities here as well. I think we're working on the PowerPoint, so he's going to pull up in a second, but in a second you'll see two graphics. We actually issued two reports in the last year or so. One that speaks to what is actually happening on the island and what's sort of our platform, particularly looking at what can Washington do, right? So the Federation isn't based in San Juan, for example, right? We're based in Orlando, and in Hartford, and in Washington, and New York City, and elsewhere. So we're not on the island. And actually, we really got engaged on the issue of the debt crisis in the last couple of years due to the experts like Edwin and so many others who have come to us with great ideas about what can be done by Washington to help the island through this crisis, right? So we issued a report that sort of pulls together the best thinking of leaders, economists, environmentalists, and others, released the past year, looked at what are the changing demographics in Orlando and Central Florida and throughout the state of Florida, looking at the Puerto Rican community and the Latino community overall. And I'm sure the findings of the report, that we'll share some of them, are things that we all already know. And it was our job to work with you all to tell that story to the media, to our leaders in Tallahassee and others who really need to know what's happening to Florida and what's the changing landscape and what does that mean for the Puerto Rican community. So I'm going to keep rolling here while they figure this out. So Edwin spoke about the crisis, and so just to recap, the basic issues that we saw is first and foremost, how do we deal with the $72 billion debt, plus all the pension money that's still owed to families and workers on the island. That was the big sort of issue that needs to be addressed first in order to really address all the other issues that are happening. And so the Promesa bill that was passed by Congress with bipartisan support in a Congress that really never does anything for anything was in some ways amazing, in some ways very necessary, and in many ways also very troubling. The Federation did work to move the bill along. In the end, we really didn't support the final bill, and we know there are many flaws to it, but the two good things in the bill clearly are the stay out litigation that Edwin mentioned, and then also and by the way, it's up now, so you can see the reports we put out. Those are the covers of the last two reports. And they're on our website, HispanicFederation.org, and I'll obviously that website at the end. But it's on our website, we have information for you all on debt crisis and also on the sort of portrait of Latino demographics, consumer priorities, etc. For the state of Florida. So again, we encourage you to go download those websites or those reports and take a look at them. And then the crisis. So again, the Promesa bill was key in having a stay on any more litigation that would have really hampered any ability to resolve the debt. And then obviously some form of both ordering the debt, because not all the debt is legal. We've heard this conversation around the $72 billion, much of it, and in fact, they're looking at now upwards of maybe 2/3 of it actually being illegally acquired or put on the island. So the hope is that this oversight board that's put forth that has its issues will ultimately recommend and approve, and with the work of Congress and of the local government to actually say, let's wipe away 2/3 of this debt and make it actually repayable. Yes, obviously the island local government has some responsibility to address it, but that $72 billion that everyone knew was really a phony number, and we hope that the local government really supports efforts to reduce the debt and then pay it at a reasonable rate. Aside from that, Edwin mentioned the out-migration being a big concern to the island, talented professionals and families leaving the island, mainly Central Florida, but other places across the United States. It's also in many ways a challenge and an opportunity for Central Florida and the whole state of Florida. So what does that mean for opportunity, needs, challenges for our local communities? Also, talk about austerity, and we are very clear at the Federation. We are past the point of austerity. There are no more rabbits to pull out of a hat. There are no more cuts to make, no more layoffs to make. The island has shuttered schools, had massive layoffs, and while that's going to continue, we know that that's not something we support, and this is why we're looking to Washington to step in to really invest in the island, to help the island turn around economically. We've heard about the healthcare crisis and general inequities that have led to that, being left out of the Affordable Care Act many years ago. Even the bill that was put forth by Congress recently that we didn't support still left out Puerto Rico in any new healthcare laws. And so what does that mean for the running out of funding for healthcare in Puerto Rico, and what needs to happen in Congress to really address this issue moving forward? And then also just over time, all the sort of inequities that come forth from Washington put on the island. And so on the next slide, we talk about sort of what's our priority platform for the island. And it's really around 6 or 7 key things. You see on the big screen as well. We mentioned we support bankruptcy protections, debt restructuring, debt relief, and debt ordering. That's all really key to really restoring credibility for the island and really having hopefully a strong economic path moving forward. We support healthcare parity, right? The island only gets a 50% reimbursement rate on sort of basic Medicaid reimbursement, right? And that's a problem, right? So places like Alabama, New York, everywhere gets 100% reimbursement, but not Puerto Rico, right? We're U.S. citizens, why are we getting half of what everybody else gets in the nation? So we want to make sure that that loophole is closed and that the island gets its fair share of reimbursement to make sure we have a strong healthcare industry. And obviously, in being included in the Affordable Care Act or other reforms will be helpful to restoring healthcare quality on the island. It's amazing that the island is not a leader in clean energy, right? The energy sector is overpriced. It's old fossil fuel energy. So why isn't the island leading the nation on wind power, solar power? There's so many opportunities there. And so Congress would be wise, and the private sector would be wise to invest, offer tax credits, whatever, to really help bolster this clean energy sector on the island to lower costs for residents and really make sure our green footprint, our carbon footprint is minimalized to really support our children's future. Progressive tax reforms. We don't have a position on the 936 and other sort of business tax credits for the most part, but for sure there are basic progressive income tax measures that can be taken, like mandating the earned income tax credit for low-income families, or expanding to the child tax credit to include all children on the island, which it doesn't currently cover. So there are things that can be done to help working families right now that Washington can do, and that there's bipartisan support for. And then lastly, this issue on the Jones Act. People talked about it certainly for a long time, and the real challenge there, as people know, is that the shipping costs that are imposed on the island are incredibly biased. We don't agree necessarily with our labor brothers and sisters on the mainland about how to resolve that, but we think that there should be an amendment to that law to really reduce shipping costs for the island and have that parity as well. And then lastly, obviously, there needs to be a massive investment package for the island to really help infuse aid to the residents in Puerto Rico. So the next slide this is where there's the rationale on why we should get involved, right? If you look at the map, Boricuas are everywhere across the United States, but certainly in our footprint, where the Federation was in New York and Florida and elsewhere. And so some of these states are really critically important to both houses in Congress, to both parties in Congress, and to who wants to be the next governor and president, et cetera, right? So we have political leverage to really make our voices heard, and that's really the main reason why there was even any action in Washington last year. Florida was instrumental in raising voices to say, you guys need to do something to resolve this debt crisis. And so, we have that power, and that's why it makes sense for us to have, both a sort of a moral responsibility, but a civic responsibility as stateside Boricuas to really be supportive of pushing Washington to support the island. Now, this is some of the findings from our recent report, the second report that I talked about demographics on the island and in Florida. You see that upwards of 75% of Puerto Ricans in Florida reside in those 10 counties on the map, mainly in Central Florida, but also South Florida as well. And so we have growing sort of needs in these communities, but also hopefully growing political power to get things we need for our local state legislature, but also to get members of Congress in these areas to speak out for our community as well. Some of the quick findings from the report, basically, and we talked about this before, right? Over 1 million Puerto Ricans in the state of Florida. That's almost a doubling in the last 15 years. I mentioned the 75% residing in 10 counties. This is the numbers from the Latino Decisions exit poll from the election, right? 72% voted for Hillary Clinton. It's a Puerto Ricans in Florida. 72% voted for Hillary Clinton. 26% for Donald Trump, our current president. You see that Puerto Ricans will be the largest Latino group in Florida by 2020, and that's a big finding as well. And what does that mean for our power moving forward in Florida? We have clear needs that everyone knows about around housing, healthcare, and transportation, and others. And so what does that mean for leaders in Tallahassee, increasing aid, Central Florida, South Florida, to make sure our communities can sort of go to school, can get healthcare, have affordable housing, commute to work, and commute with your families, and that's really important. And then obviously, it's political representation. What does that mean about having folks in Congress? We have Darren Soto now, we have Representative Torres, we have many, several in the House, right? We need to really have more representation of our leadership in Tallahassee as well. And then, I think this is the last piece, which is ways to really raise our voices. And so we want to encourage you all to both help to resolve the crisis and to improve things for folks here in Florida. Keep visiting and calling members of Congress. Come with us to Washington and visit them locally in Central Florida and elsewhere. Events like these are great to educate state legislative leaders around the integration needs of Boricuas in Central Florida and elsewhere. Tell our story. We should be better about telling our story, because talking about the money stuff and the status stuff is one thing, but if we can tell our stories about what it means for our families back on the island and what it means for us here, that's how we win this debate, and that's how we get folks to really care and do things for our community, frankly. Voter registration, education, mobilization is key, and also leveraging our buying power. We are consumers, and we're talking to corporate leaders about being vocal for the island and for us as well, and then certainly working with community-based organizations, Mission Boricua and so many other ones that are here to help register voters, and new text technology, candidate forums. Many of you were at these events, certainly in Central Florida. We want to continue to do that in 2017 and beyond. Every year is important, not just presidential years, so we want to encourage you to keep registering voters and really encourage you to keep turning out the votes. And then lastly, here's our information. Please go to our website to get those reports, to connect with us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And obviously we look forward to your questions and to continue to have this dialogue with you. So thank you very much.